Thanks, Kent, and thanks everyone for joining this session. I'm looking forward to showing you some of the work we are doing with the Power Platform. But before I jump into the demos, let me give you a quick overview of Blackmores and the team. So Blackmores is Australia's leading natural health company, developing and selling high-quality supplements for people and pets across the Asia-Pacific region. Within Blackmores, we have an internal team of Dynamics 365 specialists with lots of experience customizing Dynamics 365. We are very much pro devs, comfortable using code to extend the platform. However, with Microsoft evolving Dynamics 365 into the Power Platform and adding many new tools like Canvas apps and Flow, there are many new opportunities to do more with less code. So we have used our Dynamics 365 implementation as a proving ground for many of these new technologies, embedding Power BI widgets into forms to give users access to data from other systems, using PCF controls to enrich the user experience, and creating Canvas apps to provide users with mobile-friendly experiences. The key benefits of using these new features are our increased ability to provide business value faster and be more experimental in our approach, as we can dramatically reduce the time it takes to implement functionality and use an MVP approach to test new ideas. This ability to quickly deliver bespoke functionality on top of Dynamics led to the decision to use the Power Platform to implement a solution for new product development, the formulation of new supplements. This approach was chosen after an evaluation of solutions available in market could not find one that was cost-effective and could meet the unique requirements of the business. The project is called Project Lucky and will provide a holistic solution for NPD, covering vendor relationship management, product data management, and portfolio and project management, consolidating what are currently disparate systems and Excel spreadsheets into one fully integrated platform. Lucky will consist of many modules. The bubble chart shown here shows the number of modules we are planning to build. So you can see each individual module is made up of many smaller modules of functionality. Unfortunately, I can't share each module with you, but it includes everything involved in creating a new product, from formulation and quality assurance to artwork and sales. So how do we use the Power Platform to implement Lucky? As mentioned, what is great about the platform is the wide variety of tools we can use, from no-code to pro-code. For each requirement, the team looks at the best tool to solve the problem. As you can see here, the result is a mix of no, low, and pro-code. What is great about this approach is that it allows the team to be very productive. To me, the big benefit is that you can spend less time on the boring stuff, like modeling data and building forms, and focus on the areas where there is complexity and, as a result, business value. Also, the pro dev options are a confidence factor as well. You can be confident that you have options if things can't be done with the no or low code tools. It may be more work, but you always have a get out of jail card up your back sleeve if you need to do something complex beyond what the platform offers out of the box. So the first demo I would like to show you is our NAM app. The NAM app was built for Dynamics 365 and is targeting our national account managers. The national account managers meet with large customers and are not necessarily a natural user base of Dynamics 365. So what I like to call this app is Dynamics 365 by stealth. This app is actually built on a sample that is available from Microsoft and is called Meeting Capture, I believe. But what we've done is we've taken that app and we've extended it to integrate with Dynamics. And one of the key things, or one of the best practices we use with Canvas apps, is that we heavily use customer connectors. So one of the drawbacks, I would say, of a Canvas app and doing all the data manipulation in the Canvas app is that it adds a lot of complexity to the app, especially if the data that you've modeled in Dynamics is fairly complex. Often you end up with lots of entities and lots of relationships. And then having to manipulate that data from Canvas app adds a lot of complexity. So what we like to do is actually build our own API on top of Dynamics and expose that API as a custom connector in our Canvas apps. So the beauty of this is that it hides the complexity of the data manipulation that you have to do. And it keeps the Canvas app nice and simple. And the Canvas app really then becomes this presentation layer that is just used to present the data and allow user to interact with the data, but the API is doing all the heavy lifting. So I'll show you the app and take you through it, and it has some, I think, cool little concepts. So this is an NAM app for account managers, and really the purpose of this app is to give them a frictionless way to capture data in Dynamics without having to really interact with Dynamics. Like I said, this is Dynamics by stealth. So we give them 3 options, so they can capture meetings, they can capture interactions, which would be phone calls, and they can view reports. If they capture a meeting, it will load my Outlook calendar. And to load this data, it uses the normal Office 365 connectors that you can use in Canvas app. It then highlights the next upcoming appointment to make it easier for me to find the right one. I'll just pick this one for demo purposes. And at this point, nothing has happened in Dynamics, but now it asks me, do I want to track this appointment in Dynamics? No need to. I can just use this app to capture notes for a meeting without storing it in Dynamics. But if it is relevant to an account in Dynamics, I can select the account this is related to, and it will tell the app that when I complete this appointment, it needs to push data to Dynamics. And then it will show all the attendees for the meeting. And if it doesn't know this person, it's not in Dynamics yet, I can mark this contact as well. And it allows me to enter some additional information. If this was a contact, some of this information in my Outlook, some of this information would already be pre-populated. And now, again, when I complete my appointment, this contact will also be created in Dynamics against this account. I can make some notes. I can add a sketch. I can save that sketch. I can also interact with other types of information we have in Dynamics. So I can either create an objective, which is a custom entity we have in Dynamics, or I can create an alert. So an alert could be, a concern the customer raises, and I want to make this known to the salespeople. So to make it convenient for the account managers, they can create this message from the app, give it a priority. They can target it to like a national audience or a state or a territory. They can give it a, like, when does it need to be published from, and until when should it be visible. They can enter their information. Save, it will give them a little preview, and when they complete the appointment, this will also be pushed into Dynamics. It also gives them access to reports. Obviously, this is a demo environment. And what happens when I complete, finish and save? So I've got the options to push my notes and my attachments to OneNote. I can email them, and then I can pick the attendees I want to email these notes to. And then you can see here that it will also push this data into Dynamics. So when I click export, it will go off and use our custom API to push this information into Dynamics. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is our contract module from Project Lucky. This is a great example of a low-code solution. The only code that was written here was a bit of form script on the form to hide certain sections, but other than that, it really is all customization. We use a number of custom entities with a business process flow and instant flow trigger to start the approval process. The approval itself is managed by a number of flows that use the approval actions to manage the approval, and the Teams connector to surface messages to users in Teams. To me, this is quite a sophisticated solution with hardly any code that really shows the power of the platform. Okay, so this is the contract section in Project Lucky, and I'll show you what it looks like if a user submits a new contract for approval. So I'll just enter the details of a new contract. And you can see if I change the contract type, it will start to show some additional sections. So that's the JavaScript in the background. I'm changing the form. And I can enter my agreement date and duration and save the contract. And then we also added this feature for watchers. So a watcher is somebody who's interested in the progress of this contract. So every time the next person has approved this contract, the watchers will be notified of this happening. And then here I can pick a notification method. So I can pick email, Teams, or both. So for the demo, I'll just go for Teams. Save and close. Now I've got my watcher. And then when I'm ready to submit this for approval, I can use the business process flow. And then if you see here, if I pick that this is going to be a new agreement, you see now the legal counsel also needs to approve. And then when I enter the actual spend, and this is a big contract, you can see that it adds additional people that need to approve. When I progress it to the next stage, I actually need to run a flow to request approval from the legal counsel. What happens at this point is it will actually hand over the approval to the flow, and the flow in the background will update the business process flow to progress to the next stage. Run the flow. And I can add a comment. Submit it. You can see I cannot actually manually progress to the next stage because these fields are locked. So the only way to actually progress this to the next stage is by the legal counsel actually approving this contract. So now in my Outlook, this is actually the meeting capture email that gets sent by the meeting app that I showed you before. Just need to wait a couple of seconds for the approval to come in. And what's nice about this is that I don't actually need to go into the Power App to do this approval. I can actually just do it from my email. Submit. So I've approved the contract. So now if I go back to Lucky and I refresh it, you can see that the legal counsel has actually approved it. If I look at this, it will actually show me an approval date and who approved it. I can see it's now sitting with the head of procurement for approval. And on my other screen, a team message popped up. So now if I go to Teams and I go to my flow, I can see that a couple of messages just came in. So this is actually the watcher notification that got sent, and it's telling me that it has been approved by legal counsel and has progressed to the next stage. So next I want to show you an example of a PCF control. PCF controls are great to extend the user interface in Power Apps, and we use them quite heavily across the project. This particular PCF control allows users to interact with data that is stored outside of CDS. So in this case, the purchase order data that users interact with is sitting in a SQL Azure database. And what we have done is we've built our own API on top of this database to retrieve and update data, and the PCF control that then surfaces this user interface into the Power App. I also want to do a little plug of Tay. Tay is one of the developers on my team. I've worked with her for a long time and she's very talented. She recently started her own blog and she blogs a lot about PCF controls and some of the techniques we use on our projects, like adaptive cards. So well worth subscribing to get a more detailed view of how these things are implemented. Okay, so this is the account form in Lucky. And if I go to the PO adjustment tab, on this tab we've embedded the PCF control. And what we use for the UI is Office Fabric UI, which gives it a really nice look that fits well into the look and feel of Power Apps. So this data is actually retrieved through an API from a SQL database. And what a user can do is they can actually update any of these purchase orders. So if I double click one of these items, I can actually say that this order was on time and it was okay. So it was actually a hit. I can pick this. Comment. information which will update the data in the underlying SQL database. And then I also have the option to either search or I can export to CSV. So this experience feels really native. For a user, there's no difference between data that lives in CDS or lives in this external system or external database. And also, while before you had web resources, the experience was not as slick as you can get with PCF controls because they are native controls that live in the form. The experience is just much more natural. And for a user, there's no difference anymore between where this data is coming from and what they are working with. Plus the performance is much better as it doesn't load the web resource after it has loaded the form. Okay, so this is the account form in Lucky. And if I go to the PO adjustment tab, on this tab we've embedded the PCF control. And what we use for the UI is Office Fabric UI, which gives it a really nice look that fits well into the look and feel of Power Apps. So this data is actually retrieved through an API from a SQL database. And what a user can do is they can actually update any of these purchase orders. So if I double click one of these items, I can actually say that this order was on time and it was okay. So it's actually a hit. I can pick this. Comment. Update this information, which will update the data in the underlying SQL database. And then I also have the option to either search or I can export to CSV. So this experience feels really native. For a user, there's no difference between data that lives in CDS or lives in this external system or external database. And also, while before you had web resources, the experience was not as slick as you can get with PCF controls because they are native controls that live in the form. The experience is just much more natural. And for a user, there's no difference anymore between where this data is coming from and what they are working with. Plus the performance is much better as it doesn't load the web resource after it has loaded the form. So my final demo is another PCF control. And what this PCF control does is it allows you to show a dashboard in a Power App and the dashboard of data that is already in the Power App. You can use Power BI for these kinds of things as well, but Power BI is more suitable if the data lives outside of Lucky because there is a performance hit with loading the Power BI dashboard. So the idea behind this is that it's, it just renders information that lives in CDS in a really nice way. And we've tried to make this really flexible. And the way we've done this is we have an entity, a custom entity where you can define a template using JSON. And then when you drag the PCF control onto the form, you bind it to this template and you bind it to a field on the form that also contains a JSON of the data that you want to show. And while this is a bit more of a, developer PCF control, it's quite flexible because it allows you to really quickly define a look and feel and bind it to data that's on the form. I'll show you what that looks like next. So here's my PCF control sitting on the form, and we actually created a developer view to make it a bit easier for us to work with this control. Also allows me to show you a bit more of how it works. So here you can see my PCF control. Here you can see the JSON value that it is bound to. And here are the fields that are through JavaScript updating this JSON in the background. So if I change the project tracking, you can see that the color changes on the PCF control as it detects that the JSON got changed. And if I change, for instance, the global growth platform to core, you can see that the color changes as well. And if the health score has deteriorated a bit, you can see that it also updates this PCF control. And what is really cool, like I said, there's also a template that gets selected when you put the PCF control onto the form. So it's really easy for us to add additional cards or widgets to display this information. So it actually provides us with a really flexible mechanism to quickly present key information in a really nice way to users. And also, and that's the key thing, in a really responsive way compared to having to load a Power BI dashboard in the background. That was the last thing I wanted to show you. I hope that was helpful and maybe, gave you some ideas on how you can use low and pro code on your project. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and also thank you for being part of the Power Platform community, and hope to meet you guys in the flesh in the future or online in another presentation. Have a great day. Bye guys.